Welcome back to another video, guys. As always, it's your boy Wraith Hoops. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and turn on those post notifications. It's going to be interesting to see what goes on with the Philadelphia 76ers, as my title suggests. The biggest thing was we championed the Sixers because they had a period of time where they were just so horrendously bad that they ended up with high draft picks each and every year, to the point where the lottery eventually got changed to allow for the top teams, as in the bottom teams, to all have an equal shot at getting that first overall pick, instead of bracketing it to where the worst team in the league was almost essentially guaranteed the opportunity to bag it. With that being said, it did turn into a promising young core where you had Joel Embiid, you had your Jahlil Okafor, you had your Ben Simmons, you had your Markelle Fultz. While Jahlil Okafor would have been a prime player to have on a roster back in the 90s, his inability to shoot and really lack of stretchability was what ultimately led to him falling out of his place on the team and in the league, honestly. The league just moved right from under him. Markelle Fultz had his whole missing shooting spree that went on, but he's producing pretty decently right now for the Orlando Magic. It just happened that it wasn't for the team that drafted him, which is okay. Now, they did have some quality role player pieces, but the two main people that came out of the process were Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid. The issue with that is, while they had some success together, they didn't have the success that everybody was hoping they would. Ben Simmons obviously had a couple good seasons, but then it was highlighted by the fact that he passed up on an open layup, and that just got plastered all over ESPN and every sports channel possible, until he ended up going over to the Brooklyn Nets, where he just quite honestly hasn't been the same player that he was in the past. Joel Embiid, meanwhile, has been phenomenal and produced at a very high rate in the regular season, but in the postseason, he comes up empty. Now, I would like to credit Al Horford, because a lot of times he does end up coming up against the Celtics, and Al Horford always seemed to have his number. Now, it could be because Al's a traditional defensive big. He's learned to add a three ball to his game, but Al makes his money and he's able to stay in the league because he's not a cone on defense, despite his age. Now, people were questioning how much longer can Al be Al, but the success behind it is the simple fact that now they have Porzingis, and they're hoping that he can kind of alleviate some of that stress from Al Horford, maybe put Al on the bench. Even if they play in tandem together, they can both shoot very well, and you have somebody that can provide you even more length. And Porzingis moves a little bit better than Al, honestly, on the perimeter. So it's an all-around upgrade for them. If I'm Joel Embiid, this season was going to be a year where I had something to prove. But it came crashing down when none other than the cancer of every team he's been on, the bane of every person's existence, James Harden, decided to, for lack of better phrasing, show his butt this offseason. Now, it was capitalized, obviously, with him saying that he would never play for Morey, and basically thrashing him on his own personal video that really seek to let everybody on the league know and put the entire league on notice that he's not planning on playing. Regardless of what happens, he doesn't want to be on this team anymore. Now, the issue is, he did something similar with the fat suit situation, where he just seemed to become dramatically overweight and just sluggish and unplayable, basically, with the Rockets. And then he wanted to go to the Nets because Kevin Durant wanted them over there. And so you had Kyrie, KD, and James Harden. And even with those three stars, it didn't work out. And then he wanted to get traded again. So they sent him to Philly. And things looked good. They looked really good. And it was unfortunate when they lost. Harden and Embiid just didn't come up big in the playoffs when they really needed to. Embiid didn't elevate his game, and Harden kind of fell off of a cliff, honestly, to a certain extent. And now we have this. Now, people assume that it's because of a money issue, whatever the case may be. While I do agree with the idea behind the player empowerment movement, I don't really like the way that it's being pushed and the narrative behind it as far as James Harden's situation goes. But nevertheless, James Harden's about to be swept out the door, whether they do keep him on the team and he just sits and rots until they can get rid of him. He's damaged his relationship with Morey, and it's not reasonable to assume that he's going to be playing with the Sixers this upcoming season, at least from my point of view. Now, with that being said, the only real piece of the process we have left is the gold nugget of it, Joel Embiid. But it's like, at what point, if you're Joel Embiid, do you decide I can't do this anymore? Now, we've seen him put up egregious playoff numbers at times, but that doesn't take away from the phenomenal talent that he's been in the regular season. You can't fake those numbers across a large sample size. It would be different if he was playing, Zion Williamson games where he has a 40-game season, a 60-game season, a 30-game season. But that's not the case. Despite his injury history, he's been pretty consistent as of late. And it's just sad to see that all his efforts are basically for naught. Now, for me personally, I believe that if Harden does get shipped out, regardless of what team he ends up going to, he wants to go to the Clippers, whether that ends up being the case or not, they're not going to get much in return for him just because of the past antics of Harden. So you're not going to get a Harden caliber trade, or as good as Harden thinks he is, in return. Because if he gets traded to the Clippers, they're not going to give up Paul George. Kawhi's a no-go. So at that point, is your best piece Norman Powell in a trade? That's not really the sexiest thing to do. Now, regardless of this, a trade's going to happen. He's not going to be there. So you have Tyrese Maxey, you have Tobias Harris, who's really been pretty consistent, but he's never been, you can't expect him to be the primary scorer for a winning team. It's Joel's team. He's a good 2B, maybe 3A, because again, when it came down to Tobias Harris and Jimmy Butler was obviously, hindsight 2020, the better pick. But at the time, they felt like Tobias Harris was the piece that was going to fit better alongside Joel Embiid. It hasn't worked out that way. I expect that his stats will increase a little bit in the regular season, but the postseason is where we're going to really need to see the most success out of Joel, because this is a time where he either shows that he's that guy after signing this 4-year huge $200 million deal, right? Not franchise breaking. It does make up roughly 34 to 36% of the salary cap over the course of the 4 years. And the last year is a player option. Now, people's question, and the big question on everybody's mind, is if they can't put good pieces around him, does Joel want to get traded? And in a press conference recently, he did openly admit that he wants to win championships. He wants to be a winner. And then he slipped in there that whether it's with Philadelphia or anywhere else. Now that opens the possibility up of trade rumors. He's since backtracked and said that Philadelphia is a team that he would prefer to do it with, obviously, which is the correct answer. But you can't really back up off that when you're as big a player as you are and you say that. And it was an intentional thing. Now, it might have been from an emotional standpoint, but he meant to say what he said. There is the possibility of an injury risk. He is 29 years old. He's known for having injuries in the past. If he does overwork his body in the regular season, we could see something detrimental to him happen. Now, I'm hoping that's not the case, but you can't rule it out, especially when it comes down to a 7-foot-tall player. He's just more fragile than most people at their positions, respectfully. Now, I wouldn't say that he has a strong MVP case, considering that Jokic just basically didn't win it because of a pity narrative that was going on, and just people people put too much stock in advanced statistics, which there is no such thing as too much stock in advanced statistics. Now, I understood what some people were trying to say, but at the end of the day, Jokic was unequivocally the most efficient player on the offensive side of the ball, and he's not as bad defensively as people make him out to be. And it showed in this playoff run as he made his way to the finals. The one thing that might help Joel Embiid is the fact that Harden leaving means that now he has a weakened cast significantly. So if there is an opportunity for him to bag an honest MVP, this is the time, because if he puts up the same numbers and he does kind of make that extra oomph and put in more productive numbers and more efficiency from the field, then you could see people saying, yes, he got it before, but this is the real deal. He means what he's doing. He has less help. He's trying to prove himself. And he, despite his playoff failure last season, looks to be the guy that wants to get it done. Now, obviously, the main people, as I said before, are going to be the Tobias Harris of the world, the Tyrese Maxeys, Patrick Beverley's there now, providing a little bit more of a defensive identity, just strong and adequate on that side of the ball. He's a decent playmaker, not quite the tier that James Harden is, and he's definitely not as good a shooter or offensive piece just in general as Harden, but defensively, I would say he's a slight upgrade, even though Harden hasn't been as bad on defense as most people would say that he has been. Right under there, you end up having the Meltons, the Korkmaz, House Jr., and Reed. And I would like to see Jaden Springer get a little bit of burn because I've seen him put in some offseason work And since they are going to be a little bit weaker at the guard spot, if there's any time during his young career that he's going to have the opportunity to just put in some extra work and get some extra burn, I think this season is that opportunity. Now, not to say that he will do perfect in those moments, but I think that he would benefit from more meaningful minutes instead of just being in the G League and tearing things up. Now, when this contract that Joel's on currently right now that he just re-signed for does end up being up, he will be 33 years of age going into that next season. So the question will be, will he still be a prime player? Will he still be adequate enough to demand another max contract? What will he look like at that point? And if you overuse him now, he's not going to be looking too hot at that point. Despite it being young 30s, and technically that's still in the prime for some players. If you think that he has the longevity more close to a LeBron James and a Greg Oden, then yes, of course, he's going to be a solid player at that point. And I don't doubt it. But it's also fair to say that if you overuse him now at 29, you're going to have a lot less of him later on down the road. The biggest thing that I think most people don't pay attention to, though, is the simple fact that without Harden being on this team, they're not quite a contending roster. Now, they do have some good pieces, but they don't have that guy they don't have that strong 1-2 punch anymore that has the expectation of pushing them over the edge or making them a contender that can beat Boston. Boston got better this offseason. No matter how you look at it, Harden's not going to get traded for any substantial pieces that would make it worth a 50-50 flip. The 76ers are going to get the short end of the stick either way you look at it, which means they get worse this offseason. So they already could not outperform the Celtics last year. The Celtics get better, they get worse, the gap widens, they're no longer contenders. The expectation is not that they beat, honestly, even the Heat coming into this next season. Even if the Heat don't get Damian Lillard, I still would expect the Heat to be a capable enough team to handle the Sixers handedly. The level of expectation that's going to be placed on Joel Embiid's shoulders, or should have been, is no longer there in my eyes. If he still had Harden, then you could say, well, he's still the best player on this team. He has help. He needs to get the job done. Now, I'm not saying he doesn't need to perform, because he definitely, after last season, needs to put up much better numbers come postseason. Good players play the same way they played in the regular season as they will in the postseason. Great players and elite players play better and their best basketball come that time of the year. They might save a little bit in the tank, and they take that extra step. That's why Jimmy Butler has become such a phenomenon to people, because in the regular season, he's just, quite frankly, not the great all-star caliber player that you would expect him to be. But come playoffs, it's playoff Jimmy, and he takes that next step. People want to see playoff Joel. They want to see Embiid be the true culmination of the process in its entirety and see them, at the very least, make a championship berth. If they can make the finals, that alone would validate the fact that Embiid's been there for this long. But if they don't, it looks really bad, because you've had him for over a decade and you'll have really nothing noteworthy to show for it except for some 50-win seasons, which, if you're a small market team, is cool. But Philadelphia is somewhere in the middle, to where you wouldn't say they're necessarily small market like a Utah or a Cleveland even. The only thing that's going to be really notable if I'm the 76ers is Harden put a stain on us a little bit by pulling his antics this offseason and us unloading him. So once that does happen, the regular season, they're not going to be able to put the pieces around Embiid this year specifically to make things shake up very interestingly. But one thing you cannot do is allow Harden to make Embiid leave. And right now, because you don't get much help back once you make that trade, Embiid's going to be pretty pissed. Now, he openly expressed that he just wants to win. He just wants to be a winner. So you have to make sure you put him in the best position night in and night out to win games, and come playoffs, win playoff games. And now I think that they're capable of winning playoff games. I don't think they're a championship caliber team, as I said before, but they need to make sure that they're always in the upper half of those standings. They need to be a top 4, top 3 seed, honestly, at the very least this season with Embiid, without overusing him. Because if they keep overusing him, not only is he going to be tired, but he's going to get to the playoffs and be a loser, which is what he also doesn't want. And while he is getting paid, he's going to want to go win somewhere else. He's not going to want to keep hitting the same brick wall year in and year out. It becomes too repetitive. And when you're a player that feels as much as he does, he just wants to win. He's expressed it. We know it. The fans know it. Management knows it. And if they can't capitalize, he will walk. With that being said, Thanks for tuning into another video. Good morning, good evening, good night, no matter where you are on the globe watching. Make sure to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell for more content, and comment. Let me know what your thoughts are on the situation. I would love to see what you guys think, whether Harden will actually get traded or if somehow, by some miracle, it is a reconcilable situation. And where do you guys see the seeding playing out for the Eastern Conference or the Western Conference? But more so, where do you see the expectations for Joel Embiid being this upcoming year and those to follow? With that being said, I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.